Real quick, my entire channel demonetized because 1 minute Nico Arc video. If you like video, support on Patreon. If you or someone you know can help, here, email, enjoy video, or else. My fighting game Workstrike does not have motion inputs. Wait, what are you guys doing? Please put a stop. Look, I understand. I have been swimming around the FGC for quite some time, and I know nothing stinks more to an FG crony than the concept of simplification. The idea for this video even came about when I saw some rustling and tussling occurring on Twitter, as they are wont to do, about 2xKO's abandonment of motion inputs. Now, I'm not here to defend 2xKO, because I had the idea first, and those bastards stole it from me! So this video was planned before the Invincible game was announced, and that it turned out they had the whole same plan as me. So I just want to say, like, I don't endorse the entire genre going with this scheme. I still think it's an alright scheme, but I want my game to be the only one with the scheme. Okay, I didn't ask for everyone else to fucking steal my idea. These freaks. 2 years ago, when I started the development on Workstrike, I went on with the ethos: lower the barrier to entry, keep the skill ceiling. And evidently, the first thing I, and Riot Games, identified as being a hump for new players was motion inputs. Because I detest arguing due to it making me cry, and I couldn't handle fighting you because I love you. This video will not be why I think you're wrong and stupid, even if that is true. I would just let you a glimpse into my fucked up and twisted mind, seeing my reasoning as to why I think motion inputs are a barrier for entry, what alternate solution I settled on, and finally, how it shaped my design philosophy for my fighting game. Now, first off, yes, motion inputs are difficult for new players. I see often this downplaying of it being an issue, people even showing children and dogs doing motion inputs. Yes, a baby can shoot a gun, but no, the baby will not beat John Wick in a duel. The likelihood is quite low. I have watched many new players try to pick up fighting games, and you will see a frustration with trying to overcome this hump. To be fair, a new player can go into training mode and lab it out. However, this is unengaging and unintuitive for someone just wanting to get in and rustle and tussle. Other genres can achieve a much smoother learning curve by building off of your experiences or making it engaging. Playing a first-person shooter, all it requires for you to get your head around things is to walk around a bit and shoot a gun or two. And for a MOBA, a tough genre to get into, you at least have minions to test your abilities out on, as well as for both, teammates to keep focus off of you, giving you room to learn. Having to do homework to play is unengaging. A new player comes to a fighting game to slap some shit, not look at frame data and acquire entirely new hand movements that build off no prior experience. Fighting games are generally just very unintuitive for new players. The way your movement is based around your opponent's position, all the different buttons, and what an attack cancel even is, it's horrendously unnatural for a new player. Motion inputs just adds to this unnatural feeling of the genre. Here is a post which describes this very well. Read if you can read words. But that isn't the part that's actually hard about motion inputs. That just explains why a new player will be turned off from learning. The hard part is using a motion input in a real fight. Because even if you get down a motion input in training, the stress of combat makes it way harder to pull out special moves on the fly when you're starting out. Special moves are also more situational, so there isn't necessarily that reward when you finally put it off, because you might have used it at the wrong time, or your opponent may have hit you during its startup. It's hard to learn proper firearm operation when you're being mauled by a gorilla. As I mentioned briefly before, in other competitive games, you often at least have teammates that buffer you some room to learn. But in a fighting game, you have none of that room. Not only do you have to learn motion inputs in the moment, but you have to do it while learning spacing, recovery, blocking, dodging, because if you don't learn all that other stuff, you'll be wasting your time with special moves. This can lead a new player to not use special moves at all when they start out. But having these tools that are sometimes crucial to characters' movesets just not being used by new players puts them at a steeper disadvantage than they already are. Like, if you have someone at a similar skill level, it's a much more engaging learning curve. Or maybe there's a character you really love that makes you want to overcome this first hurdle. But for a lot of players, this does turn them away. The unintuitive nature of motion inputs contributes to the genre being one of the harder ones to get into. At least when you play TF2, you don't need to learn rocket jumping or bunny hopping day one. You can shoot people and be a little stupid for a while, but still feel like you're playing properly, enticing you to learn more. But then, why do we have motion inputs? While I've opted out of them for my game, I don't actually hate their existence. They are really efficient for button bloat. Instead of having a new button for every special move, you can have several tied to one, just with different motions. They can also give you move feeling. For instance, a charge input feels stronger because you feel yourself build up its strength, or a fireball feels like you're pulling your arms up to throw it with a quarter forward. It can even denote a very powerful move, like the crazy inputs grapplers have to do. At a higher level play, motion inputs also change dynamics. Quora Gaming brings up the Ryu vs Guile matchup. Ryu's fireball at first seems better with an easier input, the quarter forward, while Guile requires more commitment due to it being a charge. However, Guile's not only has better properties to it, but with a down and back input, he can charge up both his projectile as well as his flying kick. Due to the versatility and power of these options, this crouching pose has become notorious for being one of the most terrifying in gaming. DPs are balanced by forcing you out of block, the motion being all forwards and difficult to perform, which offsets how strong DPs are. In Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, a game that both has motion inputs and directional inputs, we find that directional inputs, while weaker, still find use at high level play. In a pinch, they come out much quicker and are more convenient. It's easier to press forwards in special after blocking than it is to do a motion input out of blocking, which shows that there is a balancing factor to motion inputs, although some of these are lessened when players perfect the motions like DPs. So I see why they exist. I even appreciate them existing. However, I must ask, if put on a scale, are these pros worth it compared to the difficulty it gives new players? And second, will the removal of motion inputs fundamentally cripple the core of fighting games? Of course, I think the first will differ from person to person. I accept there is a certain source to motion inputs people like, but I think the second is a no. It is not a core necessity for a fighting game to have the effects we love. I appreciate the fighting game experience. Getting better at them can feel like going on your anime training arc. Learning that long combo or finding a new one can give you so much expression, and the moment-to-moment mind games can be the highest thrill. Oh, those feelings I don't feel are necessarily removed when you do not have motion inputs. Motion inputs have the biggest effect at low level and high level play. At medium level play, I do not feel like they are meaningfully required. That is why I think it's good at the very least to have variety in our approach to fighting games. We should allow the genre to explore new avenues, especially if it smooths the notoriously oppressive learning curve of fighting games. And you can still develop without motion inputs mechanics that have technical depth. We can keep things like move cancels, weird ways to play with the momentum, all kinds of tech. It is just that I believe the technical heights offered by motion inputs are not so important to justify their inclusion for my fighting game. I won't claim I've cracked the code to the perfect fighting game approach, but I wanted my direction to include that complexity that can give you your training arc, your combos, and your mind games without motion inputs. So here is what I came to. I decided to have a dedicated special button with directional inputs. This was inspired by Super Smash Bros. Keep in mind, this was before Invincible, you had their scheme. Look, I understand there is some reservations with this approach to making a fighting game. However, I would ask you, as my good friend of many years, who I love dearly, to hear me out, because then you can understand why some game developers may be considering this approach for their fighting games, through why I considered it for my fighting games. But I feel like this aspect of Smash made it infinitely more approachable while keeping some of the depth. Because Smash characters still have a large variety of normal attacks that can make them engaging at high levels of play. But you can carry over between each character the understanding that the special button and a direction will do something cool and sick. And that while your normal attacks are your rustle and tussle moves, those on the special button are what truly shape your playstyle. Even if the player does not understand everything about their character yet, it makes for a much easier learning curve, much more intuitive carryover. It skips the finicking with move sets and getting down the motions, allowing the player to get right into slapping shit. Of course, I understand this forfeits the ability to balance using motion inputs, something I need to keep in mind with my moves going forwards. But in Workstrike, I keep lights, mediums, and heavy attacks with neutral crouching air variations of them. I don't mind if at first it's a little overwhelming for a new player, as long as what they're struggling with is working out when and where to use their tools, not how to use their tools. I also think having this as a core mechanic from the start avoids some of the strange compromises established fighting games get when they try to simplify. Like with the stylish mode in BlazBlue or modern in Street Fighter, there is this feeling of dumbing down. And for specifically BlazBlue's stylish mode, there is a significant lowering of the skill ceiling, preventing a player from going on that training arc. Having it as a core mechanic allows me to not think of it as a compromise. Instead of building downwards, I use the directional inputs as a foundation that I can build out from and not hold back on complexity. I've also found that it's influenced my approach to designing characters' movesets. I became quite fond of wreckers. Since directional inputs are the core mechanic, wreckers build off of it naturally with like 2 to 4 different options coming out of them, associated with the different directions. You instinctually understand something different will happen in this wrecker depending on what direction I input afterwards. And finally, the most fun way it's inspired my approach is basing characters entirely around the directions. For instance, the ever fucking awesome The Vendor, whose back, forward, and up special moves are how they move around. They cannot walk, because they're a vending machine. It feels like you're lugging around this hunk of metal to fight with. Since my video covering him, I've also given him an insert coin move, which you can mash like an old Australian grandma playing pachinko. You then fire out, depending on how many coins you have, a different item with your normal low attacks. There's another character I have planned named Rush, who is the PR manager. Her wheelchair is mechanized, allowing her to accelerate with forward special, brake with back special, and shift gears with a neutral special. Shifting gears changes the property of her acceleration, including going in reverse. And if you hold down brake, then accelerate by pressing back and forwards, she builds up acceleration without moving. But if you do the vice versa, accelerate then brake, she'll drift and blow sparks at her opponent with different strength depending on her speed. This is all conceptual for now, and it might explode when I try to implement it with Universal Fighting Engine, but fuck it, we ball. At the very least, I hope you can see how the directional inputs inspired this playstyle. The combination of brake and acceleration would just not work the same if it was motion inputs. While I'm rounding out my planned cast, if I do continue to develop characters beyond what I have schemed, I hope I can further take full advantage of the directional specials like I did with the Vendor and will do with Rush. But all in all, this is my case against using motion inputs for my fighting game. Again, I do not advocate for the complete removal. I see the benefits. I hope this video has shown you another perspective on such things and an implementation of a different kind of system. And if even after all of this you think I'm a stupid PP head, then no.